is in session. My name is Matt Hicks, the FF educator, joined by John Lobb, the Gridiron Scholar, for another episode of the College Fantasy Football Big Board Show. John, we are continuing on in our preview series here for the 2022 college football season. It is officially August. It's officially college football month. And John, before we got into the nitty-gritty, the details, getting ready for week 0, we wanted to take a moment and focus in on the group of 5. So what we've done here on tonight's episode is identified 15 group of 5 players that we haven't heavily talked about already. We've mentioned a lot of group of 5 names. So this isn't the 15 best players, because a lot of the best players we've talked about already. We didn't want to be repetitive, but we wanted to give folks the chance to learn a little bit about maybe some of the players that aren't talked about as much. So for some folks who aren't as diehard CFF, tonight's episode should give you a really good overview of 15 players that you want to know out of the group of 5. John, before we get into our top 15 guys, here are our 15 guys to mention. How are we doing? You fired up? You ready for college football? You ready for this episode?
Oh, my God, yeah. Matt, we are 26 days away from week 0 kicking off. We are less than 2 weeks away from the Kings Classic at the Fantasy Football Expo. So, I mean, I am in hardcore college football mode. We each got our Kings Classic t-shirt on. And, yes, we want to focus on G5 Devy CFF players that we haven't had a chance to chat about. And there might not be people as familiar with these players as we are.
John, I love it. You know, I was on doing a guest spot for Jared, CFF Jared's fantasy football CFF show on the Campus to Canton network. And he's told me that, you know, we have synced up our picks a lot. We like a lot of the same players. Well, now we're syncing up our shirts. We accidentally wore the same shirt for the stream tonight. I don't know, John. We're just morphing into one here. But let's go ahead and jump into our top group of 5 quarterbacks that we want to identify. And, John, the way this is going to work here is I'm just going to kind of work through the list. And I know you've got commentary that you want to feed in on each of these guys, so I'm going to contribute as we go. But let's go ahead. MichaelPratt here out of Tulane. John, a lot of folks might remember MichaelPratt because he had an early season spotlight game against Oklahoma last year. And once I saw him do that, I kept a sharp eye on him for the rest of the season. He's coming in as the 5th quarterback that we want to know about.
And, Matt, before I go into MichaelPratt, I want to talk to the viewers about G5. I did a little research today. And what I did is I went to the last 3 NFL drafts. And I looked at rounds 1 through 3. So we're looking at day 1 and 2 draft picks. 17 quarterbacks have been drafted in 2022, 2021, and 2020. 5 of those quarterbacks are from the G5 or lower. That's 29% of the quarterbacks, Matt, in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft are from the G5 or lower. They are Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis, and Jordan Love. All of those have been talked about in the Devy community. There is quality quarterback play at the lower level. It is very important because we know it's about getting value and increasing your own value on your Devy team. If you can draft a G5 quarterback in like round 4 and he works his way somehow into the 1st or 2nd round, Matt, you could flip him or trade him. And you and I have mentioned this before. Look at Zach Wilson. If you thought he was good or bad, whatever your analysis was, if you had Zach Wilson before he became the number 2 pick, you had him on a Devy team, Matt, and you dislike Zach Wilson, you flip him. He was the 2nd pick overall. I mean, that is just a tremendous amount of value. So I wanted to start tonight. Matt and I went through our top 5, and we're going to start with MichaelPratt. He was very impressive against Oklahoma. Unfortunately, Matt, at that time, Pratt kind of really didn't have as good of a season. But in 2020, as a true freshman, He made 9 starts, Matt. He threw for 20 touchdowns against only 5 interceptions. And those touchdowns were the most by any freshman in the nation. Last year, he had 2,544 all-purpose yards. He's a dual-threat quarterback. I have Pratt in my top 35 Devy prospects. He's 6'2", 210. Let's hope he's 6'1" at least, right? But it looks like, according to Tulane, he has the NFL size. Maybe a little bit on the smaller than bigger size, but that is if he can post the numbers and be impressive. He has to show us more this year, Matt, but I'm very interested in MichaelPratt this year. We all got to watch him, and he is an interesting college fantasy football player.
Yeah, John, number 4 here, Meep. It's Frank Harris, the UTSA Roadrunners. Harris, a popular stack with Zakhari Franklin, wide receiver for UTSA, right? And so this is a popular pick. He's a go-to in the top 10 rounds of a CFF draft. Sneaky dual threat quarterback here.
Matt, my model likes him. He's number 31 in my Devy model right now. 6 foot, 200 pounds. He looks stocky and well built. He looks heavier than 200, but that's what they have him listed at on the Roadrunners website. So he does have enough size. What's impressive? 5,293 yards passing, 1,220 yards rushing. A true dual threat quarterback. Matt, he's made 29 starts in his college career. My model likes him. If he was at a Power 5 with these exact same numbers, let's just say he was doing this at Baylor, he might be in the top 15 prospects. But because of it, it's a group of 5. It's a little bit under the radar. This year already, he's a semifinalist for the Davy O'Brien Award and the Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award. He was second team All-Conference USA last year. Frank Harris is one of those players. He could jettison up rankings if he leads the Roadrunners to another successful season, Matt.
John, they call him Cameron. Stock is rising. The quarterback out of Utah. He had a little bit of a slow path to starting there for the Utes, but takes over and really led their offense to be that, I don't want to call it prolific, but much more prolific than you would expect a Utah offense to be. Rising is back this year for the Utes and has the potential to be at the helm of a team that could push for the college football playoff.
And first, I got to tell our viewers, I kind of fudged the numbers. He's really at a Power 5 at Utah, but we wanted to get him in the list, so that's my fault. But he's the only Power 5 guy, but no one's talking about him from a Devy NFL. I shouldn't say no one. Rarely are they talking about him, and he's worth the discussion, Matt. He's 6'2", 220. That's pretty good size for the NFL level. He was also a 4-star prospect in 2019. Now, he ends up at Texas, Matt, and he just could not beat out Sam Ehlinger. He ends up transferring to Utah. He lost the job to Charlie Brewer, but if anyone was paying attention last year, Brewer was quickly benched, and Cameron Rising took over the position. When you look at him, he redshirted in 2019, and he suffered a season-ending injury versus USC in the first game of 2020. Last year, he started 11 of 13 games, and he was named first-team All-Pac-12. I really like this young man. I think he's someone who could lead the Utes to back-to-back Pac-12 titles, Matt. If he leads them to back-to-back titles, dual threat, I think he's a very fascinating player.
Now, John, Jake Haener, quarterback out of Fresno State, was originally with a Power 5 school at Washington, transferred to Fresno State, and John, for the hottest of moments, transferred again to Washington, but didn't follow through with that transfer the second time. So he is with Fresno State. He's back at the helm of an offense with a wide receiver that we're going to talk about a little bit later in this episode.
Absolutely. Fresno State's an exciting program. I mean, Derek Carr came from there, Devonta Adams. I'm not sure if they have another Derek Carr and Devonta Adams on campus, But, it's still Fresno State with a prolific passing game. And Jake Haener last year, 6'1", 195. He's a little leaner than I had hoped. Like you'd like to see that 210 on that frame to take a few more hits. My concern, we are looking for fantasy upside, Matt. A little bit of Carson Strong. He only has 14 career rushing yards. But unlike Carson Strong, he doesn't have any injury history. Or at least there's no red flag. Obviously, Carson Strong, the red flags, he was undrafted free agent. It wasn't because of lack of arm strength. There obviously was something going on there. But he's thrown for over 6,000 career yards, and he has 54 total touchdowns. Very impressive, Matt. His passing rating is 155, and he has started 19 games in college. My model likes Jake Haener, but of course he's limited on the fantasy upside because of his lack of rushing. The NFL will tell us what they think of him. I think could be a third-round draft pick if he produces another good season.
Yeah, John, the number one player we have here is somebody who probably has the best shot of grabbing that top 100 day 2 draft capital, and that's Grayson Mccall out of Coastal Carolina. Folks will recall Grayson Mccall kind of grabbed the attention and the hearts of college football fans in that 2020 season where he led Coastal Carolina to, it was a one-loss season, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes, one loss, yep.
Yeah, a real darling season for them in the middle of the pandemic. And McCall had another good year in 2021. He's looking to have a great year in 2022.
Over the last 2 seasons, the Chanticleers are 22-3 with McCall at quarterback. Matt, he has a lot of the traits that I like, skills of an NFL quarterback. He's listed at 6'3" and 200. He looks big. Like he looks like he has the NFL body, and that can be deceptive. I get it. But at least he's not 6'1", 185, right? He apparently has the NFL body type. What is amazing, Matt, I couldn't believe this when I was doing my research. I knew he was having a good year throwing the football. Last year, he established a single season FBS passing efficiency mark, 207.6. In his career, Matt, his passer rating is 196.1. Here's what's very interesting about McCall. The Chanticleers are uber efficient throwing the football. They don't throw the football 40 times a game. He is posting these numbers with like 25 throws a game. He is so efficient. It is almost unbelievable. He's also dual threat. 5,386 passing yards, 580 yards rushing, 65 total touchdowns. Matt, I have him in my top 15 Devy prospects, and that includes everyone in college from freshmen up to seniors. I like Grayson Mccall a lot. I have a third-round grade on him. He could dip into the top 100 if he has another very solid season.
All right, as we move on to the running backs here, I want to let folks know if you're watching us on YouTube, feel free to drop in the comments a group of 5 player who we don't bring up tonight. If there's somebody else you want to know about, we're not talking about them, feel free to drop a comment. We'll give you our thoughts on them. If you're listening to the podcast, you always have the option of jumping in the Discord and talking about any of these guys at any time. And you could gain access to the Discord over at patreon.com/rookiebigboard for just $3 a month. It also gets you full access to me and John's CFF and Devy rankings. All right, let's go ahead, John, here. We're going to stay with the Chanticleers. We're going to stay in the teal. We're going to talk about Braden Bennett, the running back for Coastal.
Very interesting player, Matt. And I again did research. Unlike the quarterbacks, it is even more challenging to find a G5 running back who has NFL success. And I widened my research, Matt. I went through rounds 1 to 4 this time because we know the value in the draft of the running back is dropping. So I said, instead of just rounds 1 to 3, I'm going to go 1 to 4. In the last 3 drafts, 32 running backs have been selected. This is scary. Only 2 are from the G5, Matt, in the first 4 rounds. 6%. And they are Pierre Strong, who was drafted by the Patriots this year, and Darrington Evans, who was taken by the Titans from Appalachian State and really hasn't seen the field that much for the Tennessee Titans. But what we're saying here is, yes, we know the odds are against these young men, but there are signs that they could be drafted. And I went through, and these are players in rounds 5 to 7. Tyler Algier, Kenneth Gainwell, and Elijah Mitchell. Now, I have not counted undrafted free agents like Austin Eckler and James Robinson. So those are still players that have had success but were undrafted. But G5, we are now seeing a new era, Matt, which has made me think about this a lot. There are going to be people who transfer from a Power 5 to a G5 to get on the field, and we're going to talk about that tonight. So these numbers might be flipping a little bit in the future, because as a young man, do you want to hang out on the bench for 2 years anymore, or do I want to go to a G5 program and start right away?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, John, our next guy here, George Helani out of Boise State, a really interesting player. 1,000 yards as a true freshman, 10 touchdowns as a true freshman, struggled with injury last year, but somebody I could really see coming on.
And Matt, let me digress because I forgot to talk about Braden Bennett. I got off on a tangent, so I'll do both of them back to back. Braden Bennett looks the part, 6'2", 200 pounds. Matt, he has 24 receptions last year, 10 total touchdowns in 2 seasons, 3-star recruit. That's probably one of those kind of red flags that you have to look at, going to a group of 5 and a 3-star recruit. But I like him this year a lot. George Helani. Matt, he was unbelievable as a freshman in 2019. He was so good. He extended Boise State's streak of 1,000-yard rushers for 11 straight seasons. Doug Martin, Jay Ajayi, a bunch of very good NFL running backs from Boise State. But then Helani has kind of been hurt the last 2 years, hasn't played in all the games. But this year, he's been named to the Doak Walker and the Maxwell Award watch list. He was also the 2019 Mountain West Freshman of the Year. My model likes Helani. I like the film and what I've seen, but he's got to recapture the magic of his freshman year to really get back on the radar.
Yeah, John, our next 2 guys, number 3 and number 2, are Power 5 transfers from high recruit pedigrees. Number 3 is Corey Keiner out of Cincinnati. I believe was a high 4-star, transferred from LSU to Cincinnati. And then Camar Wheaton was a 5-star at Alabama, who transferred to SMU because he wanted to be on the field quicker.
Matt, these are the 2 gentlemen that I alluded to earlier in the program. They are going to really kind of test this G5 narrative. Because when you are drafted in the when you are chosen by the SEC and LSU and Alabama, 2 of the elite programs in the country who have produced a plethora of runners, and then you move down. So we know coming out of high school, they have as high of pedigree as anyone. Corey Keiner, I'll start with. Matt, you were right. A 4-star recruit in 2021. He only played 1 year for the Tigers. 213 pounds, Matt. 5'10". I mean, in the American Athletic Conference, with that size and that pedigree, we saw what Jerome Ford did last year. Corey Keiner could go nuts against American athletic competition. In 2020, he was Ohio's Mr. Football and the Gatorade Player of the Year. He was the number 7 running back in the nation, number 7 player in Ohio by 24/7 Sports Composite. In high school, Matt, these numbers are silly. Over 7,100 career rushing yards, 772 points scored, 125 total touchdowns. And at LSU last year, we saw some glimpses, Matt. Watch some tape, Phil. Watch some tape, friends. 324 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns and 79 carries. Corey Keiner checks so many boxes, Matt. And I think because he kind of transferred and gone to a group of 5, he's not getting the attention. But he's one of the most interesting players in Devy. The only one who might be more interesting is the other young man, Camar Wheaton at SMU. Matt, 5-star recruit at Alabama. We know that Alabama locker room. It's probably going to take you 2 or 3 years to get on the field. Obviously, Camar Wheaton felt that this was not the role that he wanted to take to success. Let me go somewhere where I can get on the field right away. 5'11", 190. So he's a little undersized, kind of that James Cook area. I think that was about the size James Cook, 5'10", 192, something like that. But 5-star pedigree, Matt. He never got on the field last year for the Crimson Tide. When you watch and I'm not a big high school tape guy. I'm not going to sit there and tell you I know every defensive back rating in a Texas program. That's not fair. But I will say this. I can see speed when he's faster than everyone else at the high school level, and I can see vision. Now, of course, maybe lanes open up more, right? I get that. But man, his vision and speed when the lane opens up, oh my God, man, he is explosive as heck. He was the number 33 player on 247 composite rankings, number 2 running back, and number 5 player in Texas. He was a number 1 running back by rivals. I understand why Nick Saban wanted him. I understand why Alabama wanted this young man. He was an All-American Bowl player. He chose Alabama over Oklahoma, Florida, Georgia, and Baylor. He sat out last season nursing a meniscus injury. He picked the perfect offense, Matt. Tanner Mordecai, Rashid Rice, explosiveness. Matt, when they go to 4 receiver sets, man, they put him in a draw or a delayed sweep to the wide side. He's going to have some open lanes. And man, Camar Wheaton is going to have some highlight tape runs. Unbelievable. So this is a very 2 fascinating players for a G of 5, but they're really power 5 prospects.
Yeah, absolutely, John. And rounding out our running backs here is a highly productive, high volume, really bell cow back here playing out of the University of Alabama, Birmingham, and that's Dwayne McBroom.
And if you remember, Jordan Howard came from University of Alabama, Birmingham. He originally had got, and then he went to Indiana and really got on. He did the, he moved up in competition. Dwayne McBroom is a powerful runner. He's explosive and elusive. But why my model likes him is sometimes you see there is one big red flag for a G5 runner. But Dwayne McBroom has so many of the boxes that I'm looking at. He's 5'11". I love that 5'10", 5'11". He's 215, Matt. And everyone claims he's a legitimate 215. Maybe he comes in at 212. Like, it's not like people are saying he's 205 from what I can read. This is a big, powerful young man. Only a 3-star recruit. But what my model loves, Matt, 7.2 yards per carry. I don't care where you're at. When you are averaging 7.2 yards per carry, you are doing some work. The red flag, I think, from a fantasy perspective, only 4 career receptions. I'm hoping that Alabama, Birmingham, the Dragons, their coaching staff tweaks the offense a little. Give them 20 receptions. I'm not asking for the Rashad White. Show something on tape to give the NFL scouts a little bit more interest. I've read a lot of people are talking about him, like the big NFL media, because you can't ignore his size and his strength. Dwayne McBride, he has that physicality that the NFL is going to look for, like Tyler Algier, who did not pop in models, but the Falcons took him, and he might get 200 carries for Atlanta this year, Matt.
He might.
Matt's like, that's a bad decision.
I don't know if he'll be good carries. Moving on here to the group of 5 wide receivers. We're going to start here with a guy, John, that I played a lot last year, a real tried and true steady target in the UCF offense. Despite a lot of turmoil there for the Golden Knights, hopefully a little bit more stability this year, and that's Ryan OKeefe.
I like Ryan OKeefe. My only concern about him this year, Matt, is Gus Malzahn. He went from the high-flying, Dylan Gabriel throwing the football. Is Gus Malzahn really going to change? I think he's going back to his Nick Marshall roots with John Reese Plumlee at the quarterback. How often is Plumlee going to throw? But when you put OKeefe into the model, Matt, 5'10", 175, 1,277 yards receiving. He has 111 receptions already. If he gets 60 receptions, he's going to end up around 160 to 180 career receptions. UCF has been very good coming out and producing NFL prospects. This is not a Gus Malzahn recruit. He inherited Ryan OKeefe from the other coaching staff under Josh Heupel. So Josh Heupel had liked OKeefe, brought him onto campus, and he had been playing extremely well. Good news, G5 wide receivers, while they're not as glorified as the quarterbacks, they're better than the running backs, Matt. In the last 3 drafts, and I only went to rounds 1 to 3 because there are more players. 49 players have been drafted in the last 3 years. 7 of them from the G5. That's 14% are G5 wide receivers. Jalen Tolbert last year from the Sun Belt coming into the NFL with Dallas. Other notables, and Matt, I know you know this name because you're one of the only people I know who are championing this young man. Gabriel Davis, you were on him a long time ago. He was a 4th round pick, and Darnell Mooney was a 5th round pick for the Bears out of Tulane. So we do have much more success with the G5 wide receivers in comparison to the running backs.
All right, John, 2 names that are really popular in CFF circles right now. Stephon Cousins out of Boise State, expected to fill into that Khalil Shakur role there for the Broncos, and Mac Hippenhammer playing for Miami of Ohio.
Mac Hippenhammer is an interesting case study. Originally went to Penn State. He earned academic all Big Ten in 2019, but Matt, we know that Nittany Lion locker room is not Alabama, LSU, Clemson, but the Nittany Lions have a nice, solid receiving corps. Hippenhammer did not get on the field much. He ended up transferring to Miami of Ohio, and last year he became the number 2 pass catcher for Miami. He ended up with 48 receptions for 786 yards and 5 touchdowns. Sorry. He's 5'11", 182, but you have a Power 5 background for a young man who could dominate. I mean, some of us have him projected, myself included, for over 1,000 yards receiving this year for Miami of Ohio. He should step into that number 1 role in the passing game. So we're looking at a player who potentially could really increase his draft stock this year. Cobbs. It's really not about talent right now. Matt, he has to get on the field. All we need for this young man is to stay healthy. 6 foot, 192. He did play behind Khalil Shakur the last 2 years, but unfortunately, he hasn't gotten on the field enough. He was a 3-star prospect in 2018. If he can get on the field and he's a Texas high school star. If he can get on the field this year and post that 1,100-yard season with the Broncos and really open eyes at like the Senior Bowl, Stephon Cousins is one of those players that may shoot up draft boards across the nation.
Yeah, John, our next guy is Jalen Cropper. Cropper was alluded to earlier when we were talking about his teammate Jake Haener at Fresno State. Cropper was a high producer last year. There was thought that he would enter the 2021 NFL, or I should say the 2022 NFL draft. It looks like he's more set on the 2023 NFL draft. Certainly a name that you want to know.
Yeah, from a college perspective, I'm happy that he came back to play for the Bulldogs again. Over the past 2 seasons in 19 games, he has 122 receptions for 1,419 yards, averaged only 11.6 yards per catch. But here's what's interesting, Matt. I was reading Fresno beat reporters and newspaper articles. The coaching staff is tweaking the offense. They threw a lot of short passes to Cropper this year. They want him to run deeper patterns and be more involved down the field because they kind of are looking at the numbers and they need to show scouts and to be a more explosive offense, correct? They need to show everyone that he can get open and challenge the secondary deep. So I'm going to be fascinated to see what he adds to his route running and what his average per catch this year is for the Bulldogs. Because that's one of the red flags when you look at his profile is this one aspect is why is he not getting more yards per reception? A lot of it is the routes that he was assigned in the playbook. So I'm really excited. I'm trying to think, where do I have? I'm pretty high on Cropper. Let me see where I have him in my rankings all of a sudden. 28. I have him at 28 in my Devy rankings. 6 foot 172. Would like him to be a little bit heavier. He's a little bit undersized, but I think everything's there almost. You could see him being a day 2 third-round pick. And to me, by far the best group of 5 wide receiver in the nation, totally going under the radar in my book. College fantasy football fans know him, but I still think there's a lot of people who don't believe in him for whatever reason. Maybe it's the Roadrunners, maybe. But if you watched him and you watch UTSA like I have, Matt, Zakhari Franklin's, all I can say is he's good. He's more physical than you believe he is. He looks rather thin. Let me see. What do I got? He's 185 and 6'1". But when you watch him, he's a fighter for the football. He doesn't have the George Pickens mean streak, but Franklin doesn't mind tussling it up a little bit. And I like that in him. I like that fighter mentality. And over the past 2 seasons, 130 receptions, 1,721 yards, and 17 touchdowns. He was first team All-Conference USA last year. Even as a true freshman in 2019, he had 38 passes for 491 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, it depends on your definition of an early breakout. Some people will look at his freshman year and say, hey, he came on the field right away as a true freshman and really played well. But even if you look at his sophomore year, he broke out, which is still early. So he checks a lot of check marks that I like in my model and my film analysis. I like Zakhari Franklin a lot.
There you have it. Our 15 group of 5 players that you need to be paying attention to. You need to make sure that you are subscribed, whether you're listening, whether you're watching on YouTube, because we are going to just be continuing here with our 2022 college football season previews. If you're listening on the Rookie Big Board Podcast Network, you're going to want to make sure you are tuned in for all of our Dynasty, Rookie, CFF, fantasy football coverage, as well as, of course, our Devy coverage. As always, we appreciate you checking out this episode of the Rookie